Megan Gilbert.
Hey, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call a meeting to order for Monday, June 1st, 2020. This time, you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for
all.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, prayer, Megan Gilbert. Megan, I'll ask you to lead us in prayer.
If you would bow your head. Today I'd like to pray for a change that has been long overdue. If we do not feel it in our homes or in our bones, then it is our time to listen and let other voices be heard. I pray for the families and communities that have been hurt by racism and inequality. I pray that we can work towards this change with compassion as we try to heal and understand one another. In His name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Megan.
Hey, Rob, you there?
So this is Mayor Holden, and obviously we have this meeting pursuant to the Executive Order number 16 issued by Governor Bill Lee, permitting local government bodies to conduct meetings electronically. So we are doing that at this time, and as you know, everything must be on a roll call vote. At this time, this report I had to call the roll to make sure that we have a quorum to conduct business tonight.
Okay, Mayor Holden, and could I remind everybody right quick, please, everybody that's on the line, your phones are very sensitive. We're getting a lot of background noise of birds chirping and singing and papers rustling. If you would, try to get to a quiet place as you can so we can proceed. So on with the roll call. James Baltimore.
Here.
Edward Burks.
Here.
Coach Cole.
Here.
Megan Gilbert.
Here.
Mayor Holden.
Here.
Ricky Hammond.
Here.
Mary Claire Hopper.
Here.
Dennis Moody.
Here.
Janetta Webb.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum. Proceed, please.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Recorder. Next on the agenda will be approval of minutes. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from May 18th, 2020.
This is Vanetta. So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Coach Cole.
Coach Cole is a second. Any questions about the minutes? Okay, Mr. Recorder, we have a motion and a second. I would ask you to call the roll.
James Baltimore.
Yes.
Edward Burks.
Yes.
Willie Cole.
Yes.
Megan Gilbert.
Yes.
Mayor Holden.
Yes.
Ricky Hammond.
Yes.
Mary Claire.
Yes.
Dennis Moody.
Yes.
Janetta Webb.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank y'all.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Next item on the agenda, unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? Okay, under new business, first item, local government committee meeting minutes that was held on May 26, 2020. Chairwoman Mary Claire Hopper. Mary Claire.
Thank you. Our meeting was on Tuesday, May 26th. I called the meeting to order, indicating a quorum had been established. Mayor Holden gave an explanation of the history of the ordinance, reflecting back to changes being made in 2017, and the ordinance being tabled for further revisions and discussions. Mayor Holden noted that he received several comments from local business owners and vendors to request modifications and text amendments to the current ordinance. After a thorough discussion with business owners and food truck operators, with the mayor and local government committee, it was agreed to make revisions to the ordinance to meet common ground to benefit vendors and maintain fairness to brick and mortar owners, as well as protect our citizens. I asked for the revisions to be made prior to the public hearing scheduled for tonight at the regular meeting of the Dyersburg mayor and aldermen. Said hearing will be held pursuant to provisions of section 13-7-105 Tennessee Code annotated. Mayor Holden made a motion to make the revisions to the ordinance BB-672 with a second from myself. A roll call vote was made with all voting in favor of the motion. It passed.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Claire. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of this public hearing. That's item number B, public hearing, ordinance BB-672, an ordinance amending the text of ordinance number BB-672, business, peddlers, solicitors, etc. So at this time, in order to get this on the floor for discussion, this is a public hearing, I would entertain a motion to approve this ordinance revision on this public hearing.
This is Mary Claire Hopper. I make the motion.
Okay, I have a motion
to
from Mary
approve.
Claire.
Ricky Hammond, second.
They have a second from Ricky Hammond. So at this time, this is a public hearing. I don't really know who's on the line or not. I've heard some names, but this is a public hearing. If anybody would like to speak to this ordinance tonight, identify
Sean
yourself.
Todd.
Okay.
Sean Todd.
Okay.
I agree with the ordinance. The only problem I have, and of course I'm a local business, and I don't think there's anybody else there. You know, they started jumping on people when times were bad. They need to get them when it's good, like I did. We talked about it a year and a half ago during this meeting. I don't like the $50 a year because I'm having to pay property taxes, but I do agree that if they connect to the city, they should be like us on a brick and mortar. Now, I don't know what Mr. Donaldson thinks, if he's on here or not, but I do agree with that.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Anybody else?
This is Samantha Wilson with the Mustard Company store. I've got a couple issues with the ordinance in respect to the 300-foot within 300 feet of a city-owned property.
Samantha,
Our
before
food.
before we start, that's been taken out of this ordinance, okay? It's no longer in the...
Okay, so I have a question then. Because our food truck is licensed under the Mustard Company store, and I have a business license and I have a health department approval for the store, I know the food truck itself has to have a health department inspection, but will this still have to have this peddler's or vendor license because I already have a business license that this food truck would fall under because it's licensed under the Mustard Company store?
I'm going to say the initial answer is going to be yes, because it is separate from what you're doing, and you're now a food vendor or a mobile food vendor that requires that permit in this ordinance. But we will check that out. But my initial response is yes, that you're required to have that.
Okay.
Do you have any other thoughts about that?
Mayor, I concur with what you said. The food truck is going to be a separate business type, so the $50 permit fee and business license will apply.
Okay. Samantha, we will check that out, though, okay?
Okay.
Any other questions, Samantha?
I personally do not.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Mayor and esteemed council members, this is Anthony and Malia Evans, owners of the Restoration Station in downtown Dyersburg and founders of the annual community-wide event, well, actually downtown district event that has been branded as Junkin' and Jam. We have a copy of the revised version where things like the 300 feet and some other things were taken out. And so to bring you all up to speed, if you're not familiar with what Junkin' and Jam is, it is a Friday night and a Saturday. Our property is Dr. Banks' old medical office, used to be L.C. Heathcott's beauty salon. It's in the valley down the hill behind White & Associates before you go up the hill to the YMCA, if you're familiar with where we're referring to. And our event happens on a Friday night and all day on Saturday, where we allow and we charge for vendors to set up in tents tents, and we make a pop-up market we make an outdoor pop-up market basically. And this year would be the 5th year for that event. We actually have, over those 5 years, paid to have the brand, the name Junkin and Jam trademarked with the U.S. Patent and Trademarks Office to make that an exclusive downtown Dyersburg event so that no other community in the country could be branded by having, such a named event as that. It's an outdoor pop-up market. Among our vendors, we have a couple of small food trucks. We don't like to bring in any food trucks on our property because the Friday night portion of the event, we invite and encourage all of the downtown merchants who are brick and mortar who want to stay open to participate. And every year we have covered all of the costs of the promotion. We've not ever asked any of the merchants to contribute to any kind of promotion for the event. We've basically promoted the event as a downtown Dyersburg event so that it would benefit all of the merchants who wanted to participate, on that Friday night by staying open late. In 2015, the first inaugural Junkin and Jam, we had close to 2,000 people in downtown Dyersburg on a Friday night, and it was kind of the catalyst for spurring a lot of the redevelopment and interest in the downtown district that has occurred. So with all of that being said, Junkin and Jam was planned this year. It's been the last 3 years, the third weekend in September, which this year would be September the 18th and 19th. And ironically, on June the 1st each year, which is today, that is when we would launch the marketing typically for this year's Junkin and Jam. But unfortunately, we're hesitant today to hit the publish button on our Facebook page to get the marketing launched, because there are 3 points in the current version of the amendment to BB 672, which, in all honesty, if there's full enforcement, it limits Junkin and Jam from happening at all. The first thing that concerns us is Junkin and Jam is a Friday night and Saturday, and so the merchants who want to stay for both Friday night and Saturday in our pop-up market are allowed to leave their tents and their merchandise on our property overnight if they so choose, and then we provide the security to monitor that. So, and Junkin and Jam, let me back up and tell you, is a portion of our for-profit business. It is a revenue producer for the restoration station because we contract with and the vendors pay for renting their booth space on our property for this event. So this is a revenue producer for us. It's a for-profit event for our business. It's not a nonprofit organization. It's not a City of Dyersburg sanctioned festival. This is full disclosure, transparency. This is a for-profit event that our business owns, basically. But that being said, we would lose revenue, and we will lose revenue if some of our vendors are restricted from having to take their goods down and not be able to stay overnight, because they're not going to come back and set up again on Saturday morning. So it's 9-206, paragraph 13, I believe, yes, that has wording in it such that it would prevent exterior vendor cart, trailer, vehicle, tents, merchandise, accessory items to the operation remaining on the site at the end of each day. If I'm understanding that correctly, that would prohibit my overnight vendors from being allowed to stay. That's the first thing. I'm concerned in that same paragraph about the very use of the word exterior because that's what this event is. It's an outdoor event. And it's rain or shine, because our vendors are in tents. So obviously the event goes much better if it's good weather. But I'm concerned about the use of the word exterior and where that limits us to set up an outdoor pop-up market. Secondly, or thirdly, lastly, is the usage of the wording and the definitions. Junkin and Jam technically has all three types of vendors. We have transient vendors because we have some out-of-state vendors. We have some handcrafters who this is all they do. They just do weekend pop-up shows like the Reelfoot's Arts and Crafts Fair or Junkin and Jam or, you know, any other types of weekend pop-up shows. So we have some transient vendors technically by this definition. We have a couple of food trucks, but now, and I have emailed to Mayor Holden. He has a copy of our vendor contract, and I'm happy to provide each of you with that, especially you members of the local government committee who are who have brought the ordinance. And you will probably find, if you can review our vendor contract, that our vendor contract is extremely strict, very, very, very strict. It's a juried event, number one. It's not a banana box flea market. It's a juried event where the vendors have to send us photographs of what their product is, what their booth looks like when they have set it up at other places. We're very, very picky about this event, and that is one reason it continues to be popular, because it brings an attractive set of vendors from their booths and their products. And many of you have attended the event, and we appreciate you doing so very much, and we look forward to you continuing to do so, we hope. So I have transit vendors. We have mobile food vendors, and by merchandise vendor on 9-201, paragraph 9, that definition of merchandise vendor, for my folks that are not brick and mortar stores that already, you know, have a business license from another county in the state of Tennessee, those folks who are online boutiques who come and set up at the event, you know, they don't have a brick and mortar, they sell only online, but they come and do these kinds of events. In addition to the booth fee, they would also now have to buy this permit fee. So those are the three concerns that we have, and those concerns are great enough to us that we are fearful to even launch our marketing just yet for Junkin and Jam this year, because we're just not rule breakers, and if this ordinance passes the way it's worded in our interpretation, Junkin and Jam is out of business. And that really makes us sad, because in 2015, when we founded this event and branded this event and had it trademarked, our whole intention for this event was for this to become Dyersburg, Tennessee's event, downtown Dyersburg, Tennessee. We have the opportunity to take it to a neighboring community on some other property that we have connection to, but we don't want to do that. That's not what Junkin and Jam was about for us when we founded Junkin and Jam. We are invested in Dyersburg as property owners, as business owners, you know, active in our churches. We've raised our children here. Dyersburg's home for both of us, and Dyersburg should be home for Junkin and Jam. But this ordinance, in all honesty, if it's enforced to its fullest, you would have every right to pull up on the property up for Junkin and Jam and shut us down, and we cannot risk that. We would be forced to move the event to another community in order to continue having it. Thank you for your time. I hope you will consider our concerns and possibly not pass this tonight, maybe take it back to committee and involve, you know, other input and possible other revisions that would protect not only Junkin and Jam, but the future development of other such type of festivals by anyone else in the community that might want to invest in the community in that way. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Malia. This is Mayor Holden. In full disclosure, Malia and I talked about 445 this afternoon. We talked about the specific items that she brought up. First off, you mentioned overnight tents. And Malia, in your discussion, you also mentioned about city enforcing things to its fullest. And I told you that we're trying not to be heavy-handed or stuff. But as we discussed this afternoon at 445, tents have never been allowed in the city of Dyersburg. It's considered an accessory structure. but we haven't come down there in 4 years and shut your event down because of that, okay? You mentioned merchandise vendors. Obviously, merchandise vendor is a vendor that is within the state of Tennessee that is allowed to come in and do that. You mentioned transient vendors also, and vendors from out of state. That is one and the same. Transient vendors is defined in the TCA code under Tennessee state law as somebody that comes into the city of Dyersburg or any city from out of state that must go through some background checks and pay a transient vendor permit fee that's good for 14 days. That's not the city of Dyersburg. That's a state law. We've had that for a long time. Folks that come in and sell books, folks come in and sell alarms, folks that come in and sell furniture. We've had transient vendors for as long as I have been in office. But again, as we talked this afternoon, this is a pilot program. We've got time to revisit it. We're not going to run you out of business, but we had to make these provisions in this ordinance, just like you sent me a copy of your contract that you require your folks to sign, not hooking into city utilities and things like that and insurance and stuff like that. We're trying to do the same thing. But again, we label this as a pilot program. Your event, I think you said, is in September. We've got time to address that, maybe under festivals or special events for the city of Dyersburg, and we discussed all that. So, quite honestly, we have discussed this for a year now, and we just need to get this resolved. We need to get this resolved, and we can come back and visit later as it relates to this specific event. Any other questions or comments or?
Mayor Holden.
Yes.
Good evening, and alderpersons. I'm Susan Bolden, and I work with Devil Eye Mustard and Condiments. And Mayor Holden, if you haven't already received, you will be receiving an email from Michael DeRock, who is, owner of Devil Eye Mustard and Condiments in Dyer County. And as you know, Samantha's already spoken to her concerns about the ordinance and the impacts possibly that it can have on the food truck. I just want to go on the record saying, and I don't want to say I'm speaking on behalf of Michael, but I am conveying some of Michael's concerns with the ordinance and the restriction. I think that we feel it places on bringing new business opportunities to Dyersburg. There are several definitions in there, just like Malia, that, we have concerns with, such as the transient vendors and, exactly some of the vagueness. There's not clarity on some of the definitions as far as length of time, like 14 days. Is that per event? Is that 14 days out of the year?
Susan,
go ahead.
That's state law. Transient vendor comes out of the TCA code that's listed on there. That is a state law that we've, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And have followed for many years.
But if I will, the 14 day is mentioned in other areas besides the transient vendor area.
It is.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that's a 14 consecutive day, like 14 days from the time that the permit is granted. It would be for a 14-day period. So if you were to have something that you participated in more than one event per year, that would be a permit that would be required per event. Is that correct?
For transient vendors?
Or merchandise vendors?
I'm looking. I'm looking through the ordinance. Where's the other reference?
Mayor, this is Malia again. I think you may find what you're looking for in 9-204. 9-204. I think that may be what you're looking for.
Okay.
It's in
9-204 talks about transient vendor again. Transient vendor license 9-204.
It's also
14 days mentioned.
It is, and it also says that the transient vendor license, as described in Tennessee Code annotated section 67.4, blah blah blah. It then has the wording issued by City of Dyersburg. I have a question just for clarity from a legal standpoint. If our city attorney happens to be online and could help me understand on that particular Tennessee Code, does that transient vendor license not apply anywhere across the state? Is it, or those licenses have to be purchased in each individual location that vendor were to set up? Community.
I'll read what it says under state law, Tennessee Code, Title 67, taxes and licenses, 67-4-710-2. Transient vendors shall pay a fee. Says shall pay a fee of $50 for each 14-day period in which county or municipality or both in which such vendors sell or offer to sell merchandise or for which they are issued a license. That's how TCA code that relates to that law. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure. Susan, I don't know if you were through or finished or not.
Well, what I would say is I think maybe not taking a final vote on this right now and going back and just making sure that the concerns that Michael has are addressed, and I'm sure that other citizens such as Malia have maybe are addressed. And we just look at that, maybe prolong finalizing this tonight. If that would be possible, that would be appreciated. You know, I will say, Devili really loves being a part of this community, and I think it's just a bit of a struggle. We found it to be a bit of a struggle to maybe bring some new and different things, just because of some of the regulations, and so we want to bring growth to the downtown, and we want to be able to do things like, you know, celebrate National Mustard Day and things like that. And I think this is going to limit our ability to do, as it's written, it's going to limit our ability to do some of those things.
Susan, I appreciate your comment. Can you expound on what has limited your ability to do things? Regulations and stuff that you mentioned? I'm just curious.
Sure. Hang on just 1 second. One second, Mayor.
Okay.
I apologize that I have not read this thing in full. One of the things that we were discussing is we would like to be able to use the food truck in conjunction with, you know, we've done the street festival for National Mustard Day, and try to bring more awareness just to get more traffic downtown. And we would like to be able to use the food truck. It is a marketing tool for us, but it's more about awareness. And so it's really about Samantha being able to use that in conjunction with things that she's doing at the store, outreach, things that she's trying to have to bring people into downtown event-wise.
So other than her question on the $50 permit, if she needed that for that food truck, what prohibits her from doing that?
Mayor, this is Samantha. There's a provision in the ordinance about banners and flags and accessories, music and lights that are prohibited in the new ordinance. Okay. And that's one of the things. I mean, the National Mustard Day would be held at the store with the plan of being the street being used. So with that, these provisions would not allow for adequate marketing, you know, things to bring in to attract the eye as people are coming downtown. I guess that would probably be what Susan's getting at.
Okay. Samantha, we already have a noise ordinance that the city of Dyersburg enforces, and we just included this ordinance as well. We have a noise ordinance on the books for many, many years that the police department enforces. We also have a sign ordinance that the city of Dyersburg has that's been on the books for many, many years. Like Malia and I talked this afternoon, we're just trying to incorporate all of the existing city ordinances we have, such as noise, signage, backflow, grease traps, into this ordinance. We already have those.
And that's fine, we understand that, but with this being new things that we're trying to get into, we don't know all of these ordinances. We don't know what our current food trucks out in the city that are open today or whatnot. We don't know what ordinances they are breaking to not be following this ordinance. Because
right.
I've seen the flags flying. I've not seen lights or music. I don't really feel like food trucks do that. But flags, banners, those things are being used. I've seen them. But this is our questions. These are what we're trying to figure out to be in compliance with these ordinances when we're trying to have these events.
Mayor,
okay.
James Baltimore. Let me just ask. Why can't we just put this off for another 90 days and then come back and revisit it in 90 days and look at some of these things that they're asking for?
Dave, I don't mind this. We've been kicking this around since March of 2017, honestly. And again, that's why we put a program on there to discuss these very issues.
Right. I understand that. But you know, since they have so many problems with it, if it wouldn't hurt to put it off 90 days, would it hurt to put it off 90 days?
It's whatever the feelings of the board is.
Well, can I make a motion that we put it off 90 days and revisit it in 90 days?
Well, we've already got a motion on the floor to accept this ordinance in a second. So we need to vote on that. Then if that does not pass, we need to consider yours if you wanted to make that motion, Mr. Baltimore.
Okay.
Mayor, before y'all go vote this through, I'd like to speak. This is Chris Donaldson. And unless there's someone else that would like to speak, and if there's anyone else that'd like to speak, I've spoken at the last meeting, and I want to give other people opportunity because it sounds like you're about to vote it through. So,
Chris, I would like to say something, but I don't want to interrupt you. This is Caitlin, sir, from Dyersburg.
Go ahead, Caitlin. Okay,
I wasn't sure if you could hear me. So I have one question, and it's about the section 9-206, and it is number 12, and it says vendors operating within residential zones. And I'm still learning. I'm a fairly new business owner. I've been doing this for 2 years, and I'm open to continue to learn and be educated on ordinances from town to town. But when I read that, I think about birthday parties that I might cater to at a home or weddings at a home. And occasionally we've done block parties where they've got permits to block off certain areas of their communities. And I feel like that might be in violation of vendors operating within residential zones. And I was just hoping to get some clarification on that and maybe see if there was still opportunity to take advantage of those situations.
Thomas, you can speak to that, or I can. If you read 9-206, number 3, it says located on any street, sidewalk, or any other city-owned property without written approval from the city. So if you were going to have a neighborhood block party or whatever, we would respectfully request you let us know about that so we can inform the police department, inform the fire department. There's a lot of moving parts in that whole thing, but I think that might be the resolution to your question, I think, unless, Thomas, you have something else.
Well, I think when we first started talking about this, we've labeled this as a pilot program.
That's right.
Saying that is saying that we don't have all the answers. We are trying to set rules and regulations to govern the vendors because unfortunately not everybody wants to play right. So, however, I've heard a lot of people talking today about things that they're not going to be able to do, and honestly, I don't see that. This ordinance has been written to try to legalize our vendors, not to do the opposite. As of current, the vendors are not operating legally in the city of Dyersburg. So this ordinance would allow them to operate within the guidelines. As far as your residential question, we have specific zones in the city. Operation for businesses is not allowed in most of those. However, the point you just brought up would be one of those gray areas that we would want to come back and look at and make provisions, as the mayor just said a few moments ago. I need everybody to understand this ordinance is not designed to stop anybody from operating a vendor-type business. We put a lot of time and effort into creating this with the full intention of putting no one out of business. And I know I've seen a lot of social media where everybody's saying food trucks are going to be banned, nobody's going to be allowed to use them, etc. That is just the opposite. I'm going to be quite amazed if this prohibits anybody from operating, providing they would operate correctly. A few moments ago, someone mentioned about the music and the lights, the signs, the banners. The ordinance has, as far as noise, it doesn't say you can't have music. It says you can't violate the noise ordinance. It doesn't say you can't have lights. You just can't violate the ordinance. As far as banners and signage, you are allowed to have those on your units. So if you have a food truck, you can have all the signage on there you want. If you have banners and you want to put them on your tent, that's fine. That's not a problem. I think there's a lot of confusion throughout the community that this ordinance is being written to prohibit food trucks. That is not the case. Did I answer? I'm sorry, I kind of got long-winded, but did I answer your question?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I really do appreciate your time and you guys just informing us a little bit more. I really do thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Anything else?
Mayor. Chris Donaldson.
No.
Oh, go ahead. Anybody else?
I'm sorry, Chris. I don't mean to interrupt you. It's Sean Todd again.
Go ahead, Sean.
The thing is, look, if they're right, they can set up right beside my cafe. I've been down there for 44 years. Nobody else we're talking about has been down there. If they got a grease trap, backflow preventer, and a suppression system where they're cooking, it is great. They can sit right beside me. But there's no difference between me and them. What's the difference? Because they've got wheels? Does this mean I put wheels on my building and move it? If they go along with that, and the trans vendors go along with it, that's fine. They can sit right beside me. They can sit in front of the cafe. I don't care. But there needs to be a level playing field, like I said before, a year and a half ago.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Chris?
Yeah, I appreciate the time, and I just wanted to address a couple of things. First off, it's kind of picture's been painted that it was me against the restaurants, which is the absolute opposite. You know, I'm one of the biggest supporters of local restaurants, especially downtown restaurants, including Todd's Cafe, Dave's, Joe's. I have a kind of a little line that I always, yeah, definitely. And I share things on Facebook, the Downtown Dyersburg page, which is co-managed by the Chamber, Main Street, and myself. I share things all the time promoting restaurants. I mean, I'm a big, I moved to downtown restaurant because I want to see I moved to downtown because I want to see downtown be successful, and I think that we need to promote our current restaurants. I have a philosophical difference of opinion in that I think that food trucks bring business to downtown versus take away from downtown. So it's just a different point of view. I want to make another point, and I'll say this about Thomas. I have so much respect for you, Thomas, and I dealt with you personally on my project, and I've bragged on how fair you were on my project. I know you take a lot of heat about things in the city, and I just want to say I have tons of respect for you and the work that you do. But I have one difference of opinion. So as far as the legality of mobile vendors. So mobile vendors, be food or non-food, were made legal May 6, 2019 when this ordinance passed. And so that they were made legal. They paid fees to the city. They've gone through permitting. They've received permits. They've paid fees. So they're legally operating businesses as of today. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't be able to take their money and charge them for a permit if they weren't legal. Now, that might be a point to argue, but that's just my opinion on that. But I do want to go through a couple of things if y'all don't mind, and I think there's a couple of, I didn't want to jump in on everybody's comments, but Devil, I might want to jump back in on a couple of these things. But I just want to say, first off, that my motivation in all this is for the community of Dyersburg. I've had my business in Dyersburg since 2005. My first office was on the square. We moved out to the bypass, and then we moved back downtown, and we bought the buildings in 2016. I don't mind telling you, we spent a lot of money renovating 2 old buildings in downtown that we didn't have to, but we wanted to because we want to see Dyersburg flourish. And I think that downtown Dyersburg flourishing benefits all of Dyersburg. And so that's, part of the motivation. I just really believe in downtown. I spent a lot of time, my own personal time, promoting downtown Dyersburg on Facebook. We built a website for free, downtowndyersburg.com. We use it to promote things. I just spent, so my intentions are pure. I don't have any kind of, and I don't even have a food truck, but I'll just tell you a little bit about what we do. So I have 2 businesses. We renovated 2 buildings. One is Tencom Services. We're a tech services business. The other is the Mill Workspace. And if you've never heard of the Mill Workspace, we're right across from Pennington's. And we're what you call, there's a lot of names for us, but we're a business incubator. That's probably the best name. Some people call it a co-working space. But mainly what we do is help to incubate micro enterprises. And when I say micro enterprises, I mean single operator, mom and pop type businesses. And we help them make the transition from home-based business to full brick and mortar business. And I'll just make a point here that most mobile vendors are wanting to end up being brick and mortar businesses. The vendor events and food trucks and things like that are what I call the first rung on the ladder. And if you take away the first rung on the ladder, some of these people never make it to the second rung. And so at the mill, we help all sorts of people. We teach classes on how to start business. And the main point that I make in the classes is to start small. And so a big part of the class is telling people, hey, set up at community events. Go to friends' houses, have them test your product. Start small. Don't go out and get big loans on brick and mortar. Test it out. So a lot of people that have started restaurants started cooking for friends, then going to small community events. And then some of them progress to food trucks. So that's the type of people that we help. We also offer office space for people that are service-type businesses and just need to get a home office outside of their business. And we're partially grant-funded, so we do this at a heavy discount and make it available, office space available for people in the community that otherwise couldn't find it or afford it. The other thing that we did is we developed our parking lot, not just for parking because we don't need that much parking, but in our original plans, we designed our parking lot so that we could host food trucks. And and thank you for taking the 300-foot rule out, because that would have, we drew a 300-foot circle around every restaurant property line, and it would have completely eliminated food trucks in downtown Dyersburg. Now, thank you for taking that out, so I appreciate that. But that's not what we're here to discuss. So but there's still a lot of issues in this ordinance that affect people with these types of businesses. So not every food business is in a trailer or self-contained in a trailer. Some operate in tents, some operate at festivals, some operate at farmers markets. So, we're trying to help a lot of people, and, a big part of our mission is trying to help minority and women-owned businesses. And the type of businesses that we're talking about are, in large part, Malia was the Small Business Development Director forever at Dyersburg State, and she might have some stats on micro enterprises and these types of business and the people that it hurts most when you have too many restrictions. But anyway, so that's a little bit about what we do at the mill. So I won't speak about the other proposed rules. I would like to go through the items and just say, that there's some issues here. And I'm also, before I get into that, I'm concerned about the parliamentary procedure here, which doesn't allow Mr. Baltimore to make a motion to table this amendment. But anyway.
Take the motion. If the motion on the floor is voted down and withdrawn, Chris.
Yeah, but I'm just curious as why we made a motion to approve before we even heard public discussion. So,
so the motion allows it on the floor to be discussed.
Yeah. But okay. So anyway, here's some of the issues that I have. So section 9-205 under vendor permit application. Actually, I'm going to back up because I'm going out of order. Section 9201, which is under definitions. Mobile food vendors. The very first item that I see, and I will say that I had to request the original ordinance that passed back in May. Thanks to Scott Ball for sending it to me. But this wasn't on the city website. It wasn't on the MTAS website. I couldn't find it anywhere. So I had to go and spent several hours reconciling the differences between the new one and the old one. And I just saw a bunch of little things. So the original ordinance, mobile food vendor did not include produce. So produce was added to mobile vendor as part of the mobile vendor definition. And I'll come back to that point in just a second. The other thing that is in mobile vendor, it was added to the original ordinance. This amendment adds this, and it says only walk-up customers. So Dyersburg might comment on this, but back during the lockdown, they came up with a procedure, and others came up with a procedure where they put out a table and cones, and people drove up to the table, and they were able to achieve social distancing and keep food safety, keep distance between the customers. So people are actually able to drive up. And here's another point I want to make before we get too deep into this. We're not talking about city property. This is not about city property. We're talking about private property. The part of this ordinance says that you cannot operate a mobile vendor business on city property. So we're not regulating city property. We're regulating private property, and in most of the cases, it's parking lots.
Hey, Chris,
yes,
Chris,
sir.
Let me address the public or city property. We have events at Okina Park that is public property owned by the city. We've had food trucks come out in the past that have set up on those. So we're just trying to be compliant on city property as we are private property. That's why that's in there like that.
Yeah, but this ordinance disallows operating on city property.
That's correct.
Section 92063, locate on, and this is in addition to the ordinance that passed in May, it says locate any on any street, sidewalk, or any other city-owned property without written approval from the city.
That's correct.
So what we're talking about is private property here. So
That's right.
when people complain, when people wrongly complain about potholes out at the mall, the response is always, that's private property. The city does not maintain potholes on private property, rightly so. So we're talking about somebody in a parking lot setting up cones and a table. Under this ordinance, they wouldn't be allowed to have a table out or the cones because they're accessory items. They wouldn't be able to have an A-frame sign out to where they could advertise their prices and specials and things like that. But I will say this, brick and mortar businesses are allowed those things. So that's one issue. And I'll keep moving so we can keep going. There's a bunch of little changes I won't bring up. Now a lot of it's been publicly stated in the State Gazette that this amendment last May was brought, the main opposition was from local restaurant owners. And so this really started out as a food truck, mobile food ordinance. Well, then this, in section 9201 under definitions, the whole section 9 adds merchandise vendor. So it's not just a change to the merchandise vendor section, it's a whole addition of bringing in merchandise vendors in under this rule. And so back to what Susan was talking about, the 14 days. The 14 days is mentioned here. And I had a note on here, okay, so this is not about transient vendors. This is just about merchandise vendors. So it says no more than 14 days. And so my questions were, is this at one time, per year? Is this, any or cumulative? But it's just a very vague, are we limiting people to 14 days per year in a temporary location? It says a temporary location. So that's a vague point here. The other thing, so back when I mentioned somehow the word produce got thrown in on mobile food vendor. Well, if you go to section 9202 under exemptions, so the original ordinance had certain exemptions, and I think rightly so. And one of them was persons selling agricultural products. People selling, whether it's somebody selling watermelons at Saki, selling the produce cart out at Green Village Shopping Center, somebody selling a few tomatoes on their friend's private parking lot, or people selling at the farmer's market. These are all exempted from these more strenuous regulations, I think, for good reason, because people grow things in their garden, and then they shouldn't have to go set up all these licenses and things to sell just a few products. I got a copy of the requirements for the farmer's market as well, and so I was just curious that was taken out as an exemption and added produce as. So I think so. You're going to have we could probably talk about this part all night, but how does this differentiate between people? I don't think anybody should be prohibited from produce sales, but the way it's written, it would appear that the farmer's market would be outlawed. So the farmer's market has tables, signage, they're selling agricultural products, and I know all the farmer's market folks are not, they don't have all these licenses and everything that's required under this. So that's another thing. The other thing that I had was there's a conflict here under exemption. So there's a section that says vendors operating as charitable or religious organizations are exempt from this ordinance. But when you go back to up above that on the page before, so where it defines charitable organizations, under the definitions is a restriction. So it says, under the definition of charitable organizations, it's putting in a restriction. Actually, the restriction should probably be under the restriction section, but it says charitable or religious organizations are limited to 4 events per calendar year. with a maximum time of 48 hours per event. So that's just another one that it's just, what are we doing? Then I'm going to keep on moving. Now here's another one that's just really perplexing to me, because I know I don't have to do this as a brick and mortar business. But under vendor permit procedure application, section D, it says that it says the names and permanent addresses of each natural person who will be employed by the applicant and engaged in the applicant's business in the city. So I don't currently have to make a list of all the people that work for me and provide it to the city. So I'm not sure why we already get the complete name and permanent address of the person, firm, or corporation seeking the permit. And why we need everybody's, it just seems like just another regulation that's making it hard on the small business. Now, one thing that I do agree with is under the application, it adds the requirement for a state of Tennessee Health Department license. Now, just that alone, if you have a state, and anybody that knows the answer to this, food truck wise, all the discussion about the backflow preventers and things like that, those are already addressed by state health department. So if you're a hot food vendor, or they call it a hot food truck or whatever, you have to abide by certain things, and there's already written into state law the requirements for that. So it's kind of like a non-issue because it's already law, and these people have to abide by the state law anyway. So if they hook to if they hook to water supply, they have to, it even goes further than what you have here. They have to have a certain kind of hose, and a white hose, a food grade hose, to be able to fill up their tanks, and they have to have a backflow preventer in order to use city water. So that's already state law. They already are licensed for that. And then it just so on and so forth, like with grease traps and things like that. Now, a dessert truck maybe shouldn't have to be required to have a grease trap, so they're not a hot food truck. But under this ordinance, it's kind of lumping everybody in together. So my other, moving on, the section 9206 where it says locate, enter, near any entrance, that was the section where it had the 300-foot rule that y'all took out, and thanks again for that. But I don't know if it's a grammar thing or what, but I was just looking for clarification on the last few words of this item. It says adjacent businesses or business signage. Now, you could read that to say that, are we talking about visually impairing adjacent business or business signage? Or are we talking about locating in or near the entrance of adjacent business or business signage? And so that, to me, looking for clarification, because adjacent, a ban on adjacent businesses is worse than the 300-foot rule, because most of these ordinances are enforced based on property lines. So, like I say, the watermelon guy at Saki wouldn't be able to set up there because he's adjacent to Kroger parking lot. So here's some other, under the restriction section, which is, and I'm almost done, so 9206, section 9. So I agree with that. Section 9, I mean, we shouldn't be using stakes, rods, or methods to be drilling into concrete and things like that. So that's one of the areas where I agree with this. There's some other problems in here, though. So one of the problems is, it was brought up before, but talking about exterior vendor cart and then so on and so forth. Now, I know the original ordinance said vendor cart, and I know why the exterior was added, because I was talking about we wouldn't be able to do pop-up events in the middle workspace because people have to stay overnight. But these are usually multi-day events. But like Malia was addressing, that this would prohibit her vendors or make her vendors uncompliant. Now, there's an event that's happening in Union City, which I think is great. I wish we could do it here. It's happening, I think it's this weekend. It's a craft fair, antiques, crafts, food trucks, and it's a 3-day event happening on private property over by Wendy's. But if we tried to do that here, it wouldn't be allowed. But they're going to draw so many people to that community with that event. So I don't see why that wouldn't be prohibited at, let's say, Green Village Shopping Center on private property. It's not impeding traffic. You guys don't enforce traffic rules on private property anyway. So the overnight rule, I think, is just detrimental. The other one, vendors utilizing accessory items not contained within or permitted attached unit, detached signage, sound, lighting systems. I've touched on that. So food trucks wouldn't be able to set anything out beside their truck like an A-frame sign, describing what they do. And we talked about flags and all that. We go back to the fairness. Well, brick and mortar businesses are allowed to have signs out outside their business, but why aren't mobile vendors able to do it on private property? This weekend there was a sidewalk sale at a local clothing vendor, not downtown, tents, signage, all that, and I just was thinking, how is it? That's legal, but if somebody does that on private property, it's not legal. Okay, so here's, and I'm just about done. This is my last point on the ordinance. So vendors creating noise, smoke, lighting, odors using visual depictions that are offensive in nature to city officials. So the first part of that, creating noise, that doesn't say anything about the noise ordinance. It says vendors creating noise, smoke, lighting, and odors. It doesn't say anything about the ordinance violating decibel levels or anything. It just says noise. That can be interpreted as any noise, any smoke, any lighting. So if a lot of local businesses have music playing outside their store, why can't a mobile vendor do that? As long as they're obeying the noise ordinance, which is already on the books. Smoke. Local restaurants have smokers out behind their restaurants. Why can't a mobile food vendor do that? Lighting, odors, and then visual depictions. This is one that really strikes me. Visual depictions that are offensive in nature to city officials. That to me is just a freedom of speech thing. And so if I'm a church, or if I have a political statement, or if I even have an offensive statement, the Supreme Court said you can't violate people's rights just because you disagree with it or it's offensive to you. And I know that you can probably name 20 examples of how there could be some really offensive things that you should prohibit. But I just think that's a very slippery slope, and I'd hate to give that power to anyone. And so that's my point on the ordinance. But I'll just say this: in total, what I've found, and I want to see Dyersburg succeed for me and my family and all of Dyer County. But in total, all these things together, every point could be argued. There's a valid opinion on both sides. But altogether, it's a bad look for Dyersburg. Whether it's really anti-food truck or anti-mobile vendor could be debated, but the look of it is bad. And here's my big point, is there's no urgency to this because we already have a law, and it was passed last May. I didn't agree with the first law, but when I look at the first law, I think, well, it's a whole lot better than the things that have been added to here. So I just don't see the urgency. I would take it a step further if I was on the board and make a motion to just vote this down in total, because we still have a law on the books that accomplishes what was originally the goal of this, and that was, I remember it stated, we need to know who these people are. Well, with the current ordinance that was passed last May, we know who these people are. They're law-abiding citizens, permit holders with the city. I just think that there's no need to pass this amendment to this law. I personally feel like it just heavily discriminates against those without access to capital that some of us other business owners might have access to. And I'll say this, I started out as a micro enterprise. I didn't have access to capital that I have now. I have access to capital that I would have only dreamed of back then. But back then I had to be a micro enterprise. I had to start out small. Had, there been restrictions like this in front of me, I might not have been able to make it. So I just respectfully ask that you clear whatever parliamentary procedure you have to make a motion and vote against this ordinance. That's my opinion. I respect each and every one of y'all. I don't intend any of this to be personal. I want to see Dyersburg succeed, and I know you guys do too. I'm just hoping that a fresh voice might have you seeing this amendment differently.
Thank you, Chris. Thomas, any response, or you want to address any of that? Or
we went over a lot of stuff there. Chris, thank you for your point.
Sir.
I'm not going to try to address every one of these because they're so lengthy, and we've already discussed several of them. But we have got to. You keep mentioning the mobile vendors in brick and mortar. Okay, the whole reason that mobile vendors are able to get into business more economically is because they're not brick and mortar. So, they can all go by the brick and mortar rules today, but they're not going to want to do that. It's going to be cost prohibitive. So you have to set them aside and let them be different. In order to let them be different, you have to regulate them differently. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you want all the privileges that the brick and mortars have, that's fine. And it also states that in that ordinance, but you have to be regulated accordingly. So, and nobody wants that. That's not right for the business. Like I said, you went over several things here. You were at the last meeing, so you understood that basically what the last ordinance did was I just lost the word I'm trying to come up with. We were trying to register. It was a registration. That's where I was going. So a registration. At the end of that meeting, if you recall, the alderman said that they would set the policies and procedures, come back in, I think it was 6 months, and set policies and procedures. That's all we're doing with these regulations is setting policies and procedures. So if you'll go back, we've reviewed these, and this is not something that I've come up with or the alderman come up with. It's been a group of a lot of different people, and a lot of these came from other cities and other jurisdictions. We just didn't make these up. They actually came from other jurisdictions. Is there room for improvement in the ordinance? Yes. Will there be changes to the ordinance? Yes. There's going to be things that need to be taken care of. I think we were discussing earlier, and I apologize, I didn't get the name. I can't hear very well on the phone, but they're operating in residential zones. They're acting as a caterer. You can do that. I just personally don't think that this is going to prohibit anybody from operating and running a food vendor or a merchandise vendor. You were mentioning a minute ago the backflows and the grease traps. Not all people are going to be required those. If you read the rest of the ordinance, it said as required by local adopted codes and standards. So there's certain businesses that will not be required a grease trap. If you're not dumping grease into our sewer, then you're not going to be required a grease trap. If you're not posing a threat to our water system by hooking into the water, you're not going to need a backflow. So there's a lot of, I think, misunderstandings is what people are hearing. You mentioned smoke, that they can't have a smoker. That's not correct. They can have a smoker. They can have a smoker up until the point where it creates a dangerous situation like we had on the corner of, I think it was Troy and Sampson or Gordon, where it was blocking the actual traffic coming through the intersection. You can have music up until the point where it violates our noise ordinance. You can have lights up until the point where it violates it. You can have the banners, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, on your vehicles, on your tents, on your trailers. Everybody that I'm listening to, it sounds like you believe we are trying to prohibit these vendors, and that is not the case. Like I said, I know I'm not covering everything you brought up, but that's the best I can do at this time.
Thanks, Thomas. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, James Baltimore again.
Hey, Mr. Baltimore.
I really don't want us to do what we did a few years ago. You remember Boss Hog? We ran them out of town because we had an ordinance that wouldn't allow them to have events downtown. And the lady with the jumping jam, I mean, that pricked my heart when she was talking about how they operate overnight like that. I wonder, and I plead the blood of Jesus with us tonight, if we could not go back and look at this for another 90 days and come back with this. I plead with y'all tonight not to vote for this tonight so we could go back for another 90 days and try to bring everybody in compliance with and Thomas, you know how I feel about you. I know you do a wonderful job. No, I think you're doing a good job also. I wish that we could bring that this motion that we have, that it could be rescinded and we go back and look at it for 90 days.
I appreciate that, Mr. Baltimore. And with this ordinance, we are trying to get them legal. And as Thomas has mentioned in the meeting last week, the local government committee, as we mentioned before, they're not operating legally.
But for 90 days, if they're not doing it right now, why can't we just look at it for 90 days?
Mr. Mayor, Sean Todd again.
Hey, Sean.
I'm sorry. Yeah, last time we looked at it for 90 days, it took how many 8 months, 9 months?
About 9 or 10
Look at this.
months.
Now, here's the problem. I understand what Chris is saying. And here's the problem. It is a city ordinance about the grease trap. It's also a city ordinance about the backflow preventer. If they are serving bag-in-the-box, not canisters or not cans. But the problem comes into, and I understand brick and mortar. My mother and father bought the place back in 1976. These people understand they're trying to make a living, and that's fine. But make it a level playing field. But do they not understand this? Does that mean, Chris, and I hope you're on the phone, I mean no harm about this, and if I wish I was up there in public with you, but does this mean I can sit up right beside you, even though you had to have this? Oh, excuse me, let me do this. Oh, I'm going to have to save $400 or $500 every month to do this? You've got to make it a level playing field, everybody.
Hey, Sean, I'll just say one thing.
What about 90 days? 90 days.
I agree with Mr. Baltimore, but Sean, what I would say to that is this ordinance does not, the mobile food vendors already have to do those things under state law to get their.
No, they don't. Grease trap is not under state law. Backflow preventer is not under state law. And if you're having a smoker outside, it should be covered. That is state law. If you're cooking outside, it should be covered and by vents and everything. I mean, it should be covered where no bugs or anything else gets in there.
Now, there's a separate law for mobile food vendors under the state, and they all have to.
That's right. That don't mean it's right. Does that mean I can set up a micro business beside you, right over there, and all of a sudden I don't have to do what you have to do?
Yeah, and I don't want to make
that's what I'm
me and you thing, Todd. But here's
no.
Here's the thing, though, Todd. You can set up. There's nothing stopping a brick and mortar business from setting up over right beside you. And there's nothing stopping a IT services company coming over and setting up beside me. It's just competition.
Right, but here's what I'm saying. Make it a level playing field. Grease traps, backflow preventers. If you've got a bag in the box, if you've got canisters, that's fine. If you're selling Cokes out of a can, that's fine. But suppression systems, I have to get them checked all the time. And, I have to get my grease trap dropped every 2 months. So what I'm saying is make it a level playing field. If they're cooking, or are they going to cook at home? All right, that's fine. Let them cook at home. Bring it there. Then they shouldn't have to. But if they hook up with a city just like me, there is no difference.
Yeah, and in most cases, they're not hooking up to the city. So it's kind of a non-issue because in most, Caitlin might be able to address this, but I think in their case, they never hook up to city utilities. They have their own, they bring their own water. They take care of it.
You're right. If they're self-contained, no problem. But what are they dumping the grease at?
That's between
so does that mean
the health department.
Oh, okay. So the state who has 2 people who does all this. But what I'm saying is I'm not trying to argue it's not between me and you. What I'm saying is make it a level playing field.
But that argument, Todd, is it's not a level it's not a level playing field because food, brick and mortar restaurants enjoy many more benefits than a food truck.
How so?
You
How
have
so? $50 for 14 days? $50 for 14 days. I have to pay property tax, which is $2,500 for city and county. Now, I'll tell you what, tomorrow you come by the cafe for lunch and we'll talk.
Hey, thank you, Sean. Go ahead, Chris. Let me wrap this up. Go ahead.
I've made my point. Sean's made his point. It's a difference of opinion, and I respect that. So I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Very much so.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor. Hi, this is Jennifer Pete with Devla. I have one comment, if I may. I think some of the wording is written so that it does look like it's restrictive instead of bringing into compliance with ordinances. The actual ordinances aren't addressed. It just says that there are restrictions. And I think that's where most of us read this and went, wait a minute, what's going on here? I think if it was written clearer that there was a noise ordinance and it said you have to comply with the noise ordinance or you're in violation and that is restricted, those kind of wording would make this clearer for everybody.
Any other public comments?
Mayor, this is Malia Evans. I would just like to close with one short comment and reiterate what the speaker immediately before me said. I believe that is really the only solution that needs to happen. It's just some tightening up of some verbiage. I am in full support, actually, of many of the things that are in this current ordinance tonight where it relates to the regulation of safety and sanity of food vendors. I am fully aware and appreciate and respect, and I have no doubt at all in my mind that you and this esteemed city council are pro-business. You're pro-small business, you're pro-micro-business, you are pro-large industry.
Right.
I totally believe that, and that is why we choose Dyersburg as our home. That's why we own 2 businesses in Dyersburg. We're not going anywhere. We're not leaving this community and our love for this community. We just would respectfully ask that the current motion be voted on quickly, if you don't mind. This meeting's going on an hour and a half, and I'm hungry. So, but we would respectfully ask for you to consider the voices that have been expressed tonight and the concerns that are simply, really, in summary, just related to the way the ordinance is worded. In full disclosure, in my fault, I wasn't really aware that I was actually already violating the law with Junkin and Jam, and in all honesty, we're going to fix that, and we would like for this ordinance tonight to put us in full compliance, and we would make changes that we need to make the event compliant, just like we would expect any food vendor that comes into town to be in compliant as well. So we are in full support of an ordinance that is fair and worded where there's no ambiguity. Our greatest concern is that when you put an ordinance on the books, you might be the mayor and the board that voted in, but 8-10 years from now, there may be a different mayor, a different board that's enforcing it. So whatever it says is what it says, and that's what it actually means. So we just ask for you to consider the wording and look at every paragraph and just see if it could be cleaned up a little bit. And I fully believe that you're on the right track with this ordinance, and we fully appreciate your leadership, and we're here to help in any way we can. Thank you for having the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Maria. And in the email you sent me that had your vendor contract is very similar to our ordinance. So, again, I appreciate your comments about Dyersburg being pro-business. We've always been pro-business. We will continue to be pro-business. I disagree with Chris. It's a bad look for Dyersburg. I disagree wholeheartedly, Chris. I really do. But nevertheless, we all have our own opinions. So any other comments? Any other comments for the public hearing? Okay, hearing none. We have a
Gilbert here.
Okay.
is this a time for me to speak?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I want to address a couple things on both sides. I want to say that I know that a lot of work has gone into this, and I very much appreciate it. This started with the intent just to know, who was in our community and, properly, doing working, whatever. And so I think that we are all fully behind that, and that is our good intent. I do understand that we are not going to please everyone. I think that's, most cases in life that we won't please everyone. I do think it is very important that, I think it's important to all of us that there is growth in our community, and I think that is most important, and I think that can only benefit everybody, those opposed and unopposed, that we have growth in our community. And so, with that said, I can understand how there are certain things that would feel as though they might deter people. And I guess I also just want to make note that I do feel confident and good knowing that we do already have an ordinance in place so that they, if we do have mobile vendors of any kind here, they will have to abide by the ordinance that is in place. I also am realizing that there are a bit of redundancies in our current and modified ordinance that, as we've mentioned, a lot of them have been already noted in, or that they already are laws in place, like such as with the tents, with the noise, with the obstruction. Those are already laws, ordinances that are in place that are just kind of reiterated here. But I think it's also been made clear that it hasn't been very clear to everybody who's read it. And so since there has been amendments and not everyone has been able to see this, I hate to be that person to prolong this, but I would be with James Baltimore on this in prolonging this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, at this time, Ms. Recorder, I think we have a motion on the floor to accept this ordinance BB 672 in the form that was mailed out and discussed tonight, and we have a second. So with that, I would ask you to call the roll. If you said yes, if you vote yes, you're voting for this ordinance as it is now that we've discussed tonight, that was sent to you in the packet. If you vote no, you're voting against it. So, Mr. Recorder, I would ask you to call the roll.
Okay. James Baltimore?
No.
Edward Burke?
We have an ordinance in effect, and what we're looking at tonight, I think, is text amendments. I think we need to revisit in committee and try to clear up some of this confusion and vote at a future meeting. So for tonight, I'm voting no.
Coach Cole?
No.
Megan?
No.
Mayor Holden?
Yes.
Ricky Hammond?
I know I second the original motion, but after hearing all this discussion, I'm going to vote no.
Mary Claire Hopper?
Yes.
Dennis Moody?
Yes.
Vanetta Webb?
We'll vote no and ask that we take it back to committee and try to clarify and so that we can come back with an ordinance that is more clear.
Okay, motion does not carry.
All right, thank you, Mr. Recorder. Next item on the agenda, attorney invoice. That was attached to your agenda, amounts $5,799.95. I entertain a motion to approve the attorney invoice.
I so move. James Baltimore.
Have a motion
Second,
from Mr.
Willie
Baltimore. Second from Willie Cole. Mr. Recorder, you want to call the roll, please?
James Baltimore?
Yes.
Edward Burks?
Yes.
Coach Cole?
Yes.
Megan Gilbert?
Yes.
Mayor Holden?
Yes.
Ricky Hammond?
Yes.
Mary Claire Hopper,
Yes.
Dennis Moody,
Yes.
Vanetta Webb.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Recorder. Next item on the agenda is bids. Greg Williams, they were attached. You had two bids, one for the water plant, one for solid waste. Both of those were budgeted, and it was approved during the last of the current budget we're in, so we don't need to take any action. That's just there for your information. Next item on the agenda, report from Alderman, James Baltimore.
I have no report tonight, Mayor.
Okay, Edward?
Yes, a couple of things. When do we anticipate the completion of the asphalt on the east end of Mall Boulevard?
So that's
Mayor, would you like me to speak? Yeah, would you like
Yes,
me
sir.
to speak on that?
Yes, sir.
That is currently under process, Edward. We just got through with the environmental phase. This is a TDOT project through the STP funds. The project is being managed by AECom out of Nashville, but it is moving. Hopefully, we'll have it done this year.
Okay. Hopefully, or you think we will have it done this year?
I would hope it will go out to bid within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Next 4 to 6 weeks?
I would hope it will go out to bid in the next 4 to 6 weeks, yes.
Okay, I just couldn't hear you clearly. Okay, and then the other thing, Mayor, when do you think we'll be able to meet, the board will be able to meet face-to-face again?
I think the governor's executive order expires actually at the end of this month. I'm hoping that's going to be changed. Obviously, we need to have budget committee meetings and budget hearings. Steve is gathering all of that information, and he's going to send that to you hopefully this week as far as all the requests have been submitted by department heads. But I'm hoping we can start as hopefully early as next week.
Okay, that's all.
All right, thank you. Coach Noah?
No report.
Okay, Megan?
Again, I just want to show, put out my love and compassion for those dealing with inequality at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ricky?
Yes, Mayor, there's been some questions about the city pool, when and if they're going to be open this summer. You and I have had some discussions, and I've talked with Andy Baker, and I've also reached out to the other Recreation Committee members, and we hope to have some answers in the next few days or so.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else? Mary Claire?
I'd like to thank everyone who spoke tonight at the public hearing. And as a chairman of the local government committee, I've heard your concerns, and I look forward to meeting very soon to adjust the ordinance and its language to help make this pilot program the best it can be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis?
No report.
All right, Vanetta?
No report.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Meeting's adjourned. Be safe and have a good night. Thank you.
You too. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.